Welcome! In this explainer, we're going to explore the science behind why we do what we do. We'll be tackling a really fundamental question in behavior analysis: what's the difference between motivating operations and stimulus control? Let's dive in. So, think about the last choice you made. What was behind it? Were you driven by a genuine need, a real want for something? Or did you just see a chance and take it? This is the core question we're going to unpack today: the difference between that internal drive to act and the external signal that tells you now is the time to do it. Okay, so to get started, we need to understand where both of these concepts fit into the bigger picture. In the science of behavior, they're both known as antecedents, and all that means is that they happen before a behavior, setting the stage for everything that comes next. Right, so both motivating operations and the cues for stimulus control are precursors to our actions. They're absolutely critical variables that influence whether a behavior is going to happen or not. But, and this is the important part, they work in very, very different ways. All right, let's start with motivating operations, or what we'll call MOs for short. The simplest way to think about an MO is that it explains the why behind what you do. It's the variable that dials your desire up or down. You can think of it as the engine of your motivation. So, here's the more technical definition. A motivating operation is an environmental variable that does two really powerful things. First, it temporarily changes how effective a consequence is, like a reward. And second, it changes how often you do things to get that consequence. And those two jobs are broken down perfectly here. The first is the value-altering effect. This is what makes you want something more, or maybe want it less. Then there's the behavior-altering effect. Because you now want that thing, you're much more likely to do things that have gotten it for you in the past. So one changes the want, and the other changes the doing. A classic example is just being hungry. If you haven't eaten in several hours, that state of food deprivation is a motivating operation. It makes food an incredibly powerful reinforcer. That's the value-altering effect. And the behavior-altering effect? Well, that's when you start opening the fridge, scrolling through food delivery apps, or just thinking about what to eat. Your behavior changes to solve that problem of hunger. Now, motivating operations come in two main flavors. You have an establishing operation, or an EO, which establishes the desire. It turns the motivation way up. Hunger is a perfect EO for food. And on the flip side, you have an abolishing operation, or an AO, which pretty much abolishes that desire. So being completely full after a huge meal, that's an AO for food. The value of taking another bite is practically zero. Okay, let's switch gears to our second key concept. If the motivating operation gives us the why for our actions, stimulus control is all about the when and the where. It's that external cue in our environment that signals an opportunity is available. So, technically speaking, we say a behavior is under stimulus control when it's much more likely to happen when a specific signal is present. And that's because in the past, doing that behavior in the presence of that signal has led to reinforcement.
And the star of the show here is the discriminative stimulus, or SD for short. Now, this is a really important distinction. An SD doesn't change how much you want something. It's simply a signpost, a cue that lets you know that reinforcement is now available if you perform a specific action.
Think about a walk sign at a busy intersection. That little glowing sign is a perfect SD. It doesn't make you want to get to the other side of the street any more than you already did. All it does is signal that now is the safe and appropriate time to do the behavior of walking across, which gets you the reinforcement of reaching your destination. All right, so now that we've looked at the why of motivating operations and the when of stimulus control, let's put them side by side. This will really help sharpen the distinction and highlight their unique jobs. So here it is, the key difference. A motivating operation changes the value of a consequence. It answers the question, how badly do I want this right now? In contrast, a discriminative stimulus, the SD, signals availability. It changes the likelihood of a behavior by answering the question, is now a good time to get it? Really, the easiest way to remember this is MO is the motivation, SD is the opportunity.
But it's really important to understand that in our everyday lives, these two concepts don't operate in a vacuum. They almost always work together, in partnership. They're a dynamic duo that, together, influence pretty much everything we do.
Let's just walk through a quick scenario. First, the motivating operation sets the stage. You're hungry.
That hunger and establishing operation ramps up the value of food. Then, as you're driving down the street, a discriminative stimulus appears. You see a restaurant sign. Now, that sign doesn't make you any hungrier, but it signals the opportunity, the availability of the very thing you now value so highly. I really like this quote because it just sums everything up so well. The motivating operation gives you the reason to act, that internal motivation, and the discriminative stimulus gives you the green light to act, that external signal. Let's try one last analogy to really lock this in place. You can think of your motivating operation as being like the fuel gauge in your car. It tells you exactly how much you need something. When that gauge is pointing to empty, your motivation to find gas is extremely high. So if the MO is your fuel gauge, then the SD is the big gas station sign you see on the side of the highway. That sign doesn't change your need for fuel at all, but it tells you exactly where and when you can satisfy that need. If your tank is full, you just drive right past it. But if you're running on fumes, that sign is going to trigger some immediate action. So let's quickly recap the key takeaways. First, motivating operations are all about motivation. They change the value of a consequence. Second, discriminative stimuli are all about opportunity. They signal when that consequence is available. And finally, and maybe most importantly, they're a team. They work together to guide our behavior. And that brings us to the end of our explainer. We've seen how motivating operations and stimulus control work in tandem as this powerful duo. From feeling thirsty and then spotting a water fountain, to feeling exhausted and then seeing your bed, this dance between motivation and opportunity is constantly shaping our actions. Understanding this distinction gives us incredible insight into the science of why we do what we do. Thanks for joining me.